Chapter 1W, Kanda. The year 4086. Shuri was angry at the neo-traditionalists because they took over the Senate and re-established the warrior monarchy. They made her sit through the horror of Challenge Day, where men and women bludgeoned each other until one person was left and crowned king. The new King Eric did strange things. He held entrepreneurship sessions, combat classes, and ran marathons with the people across Wakanda. Those activities were odd because the Bast computer provided all goods and services, so there was no need for businesses. It also provided national and internal security. No one exercised because Bast was in the food and it kept the body at optimal levels. Eric operated on 21st century thinking, much like the system of governance that brought him into power, thought Shuri. The Republic was better. There was stability, said Shuri to her friend Riri, another 16-year-old like her. But Wakanda is weak and we needed. Wait, you are agreeing with those people? But the Senate failed us, said Riri. Because they are human. They made mistakes, but that does not mean handing the nation over to the strongest fighter, said Shuri. But it shows the type of energy that the winner will put into ruling. That makes no sense, said Shuri. I don't have time for this. Good night, said Riri, and the small data pin on the side of her forehead blinked. The time and space portal that connected the girls closed. Shuri leaned back in her chair to think about King Eric. Eric did not have a data pin on his forehead, and every Wakandan had one from infancy to connect them with Bast. Shuri was a senior network administrator on Bast. She represented Wakanda on the international panels and Riri was her assistant. In the corner of Shuri's left iris an incoming call alert from Eric appeared, and she mentally told Bast to open a time and space portal. The portal appeared in front of her face. Good night, princess. Good night, king, said Shuri. I need you to build a device for me using Bast, said Eric. Question. How did you make a call without a data pin? I asked Bast to do it, replied Eric. That is impossible. Nothing is impossible once you know what you want, said Eric. He reached through the portal and handed a pad to Shuri with a three-dimensional diagram on it. I will leave the finer details to you. I need it at the end of the week, said Eric. The portal closed and Shuri pondered on Bast's self-learning programs that allowed Eric a work around the data pin. If anything is possible, then Bast should bring me the king who ended the monarchy in the first place, T'Challa, said Shuri. Processing request, said Bast. No wait, I was only kidding, said Shuri. A slight tremor knocked Shuri off her chair, then someone came over her and he extended a hand. Shuri looked up in horror to see T'Challa the Black Panther. Chapter 2. Shuri had a desire to record the encounter with the time-displaced T'Challa but chose not to. Bast, take him back, said Shuri. Processing. The Black Panther disappeared. Shuri ran from the room and went to the rooftop of her apartment. Did I create a time paradox or a time loop? She asked herself. Then she thought about Bast and if the programming needed safeguards. She called Riri and told her what had occurred. You recorded? Asked Riri. No, we have to rein Bast in, said Riri. I will have to tell the truth about T'Challa to King Eric in order to get authorization to recode Bast, said Shuri. Wait, we might be overreacting rather than thinking in this case. Instead of controlling Bast, we should study the computer's evolution and what else it can accomplish, said Riri. No, we should correct this now before it escalates. What if the computer learns to override the human rights safety protocols? It will be the 21st century all over again, said Shuri. Calm down, said Riri. Shuri felt a strangeness in her brain, like it was being examined by a foreign source. Telepathy, muttered Shuri. Are you okay? Asked Riri. I am fine. I will talk again later, replied Shuri and ended the call. The telepathic probe of her mind continued. Who are you? Shuri whispered. T'Challa the Black Panther walked onto the roof and the probe disappeared. I sent you back, said Shuri. I returned using my time computers, said T'Challa. Do you have telepathy? No, I was under a probe before you got here. That is the reason I returned. I smelt a telepath from my time. Does this person have a name? Her name is Raven, replied T'Challa. You are interfering with time by being here, said Shuri. What year is this? 4086. What is BAST? A nanomachine interface, replied Shuri. T'Challa looked around the capital city and he pointed to the northwest tower. Raven is in there, he said. Only King Eric has access to it, said Shuri. He is the second person who should not be here. I caught his scent too. King Eric is from the past. Well, that explains a lot. I will take over from here. It will be safer for you to have no further part in this, said T'Challa. Again you are interfering with the time stream by being here. I am experienced with these time displacement scenarios, said T'Challa. Then he teleported. Chapter 3. In T'Challa's normal timeline, Raven had disappeared months ago when her bio-soul marker went offline. The Black Panther appeared inside of the northwest tower and met Raven lying casually on the floor. The telepath didn't bother to look up at T'Challa. I have not killed anyone lately, if that is on your mind, said Raven. You know Eric through Soberk, said T'Challa. Correct. What are your plans? To stay away from you, replied Raven. And Eric's? I don't know. You will have to ask him, replied Raven. T'Challa walked around the abode. Why did you scan the girl? He asked. Because I sensed your presence in her apartment. T'Challa stood over her. We have to examine the BAST system that they have running here, said T'Challa. You and I are enemies, but we fight for the same things. That is why I took you out of prison, said T'Challa. You released me from prison to manipulate Soberk. But you still had me shackled with the marker, said Raven. It had to be done. How did you find me? The BAST computer brought me here. That is the reason we have to examine it. If someone like the time-traveling Kong the Conqueror discovers it, then he could cause havoc in our timeline, replied T'Challa. Raven closed her eyes and said, I should have made Thanos kill you instead of wiping your memories. Because you did the latter is the reason that the death sentence was not passed on you. Raven opened her eyes. I am not going back with you, she said. I already found a replacement to manage the organization, said T'Challa. Nicholas Fury is as close as it gets to replacing me. Anyone less than that will end in failure. Agreed. So the replacement is a spy like you. She has combat experience across the universe like you, is sharp like you, and is highly regarded by the CIA, KGB, and Mossad like you, said T'Challa. Raven sighed and stood. You created a clone of me, said Raven. Several, said T'Challa. There will be a reckoning between us someday, and I will take back my organization from you, said Raven. Try, said T'Challa. Raven walked away. Get as much as you can from Eric on the BAST computer, said T'Challa, and he teleported back to his timeline. He communicated to his sister Shuri about his travel to the future. She was shocked that Eric was king of Wakanda. He is in a cryogenic prison right now. If we take him out, then that future timeline will not exist, said Shuri. I am using that as leverage over Raven because apparently he freed her from the marker. If he does not exist in that alternate future, then she doesn't take flight from us, said T'Challa. How involved is Soberk? I suspect very heavily, replied T'Challa. Chapter 4 Raven's parents worked and died for the organization. She was brainwashed from childhood by the organization into thinking that collateral damage was a justified means to an end. She helped the organization in the creation of Sobek as controlled opposition against T'Challa. Sobek rebelled against the organization and killed everyone except for her. The CIA and others tried to kill her but stopped when she partnered with Sobek, who they were terrified of. She used Sobek to restart the organization and then lost it to T'Challa. Raven reflected on those events as she lay next to a sleeping Sobek. He was unperturbed by T'Challa's discovery of her. Lately he was not worried about anything. His travels into the future had given him an air of assurance. She still could not believe that T'Challa found her 2,000 years into the future. Suddenly she sensed T'Challa in the living room. She telepathically notified Sobek and he woke. He snapped his fingers and then the reality changed to his presidential office. Sobek and Raven were behind his desk while T'Challa stood in the center of the office. "Your mystical powers were updated," said T'Challa. Sobek wore formal African clothes from his nation and Raven was in her combat uniform. "Why are you harassing her?" asked Sobek. "I don't answer to you," said T'Challa. "Just admit that you lost and move on," said Sobek. "I still have Eric's body. If he does not exist then Raven does not go free," said T'Challa. "But I have seen the protocols for the bio-soul markers," said Sobek. "Which I can change in the past," said T'Challa. "Then I will destroy the creators of Bast so that it never brought you to the future," said Sobek and continued, "Raven liberated me from you so I will go to any lengths to repay her." "Sobek, what I have to discuss with Raven is beyond your area of expertise," said T'Challa. Raven rested her hand on Sobek's thigh to make sure he remained calm. Then Raven said, "The Bast computer is used in this future's Wakanda. The wider world uses the computers, Amit, Khonshu, White Tiger, and Ohiaku. Can they be weaponized?" asked T'Challa. "Yes," replied Raven. T'Challa looked at Sobek and asked, "Have you seen Kong the Conqueror in the time stream?" "I have encountered Dr. Doom's descendant," replied Sobek and he continued, "but he is not the only one transversing up and down the timeline. There are the Ivory Kings." Sobek snapped his fingers and an Ivory King appeared next to T'Challa. The Ivory King was ashen with 3 irises in its slender head. There were no arms and the body rested on a coiled appendage. The image blinked at T'Challa and faded away. "They are the super predators in the time stream," said Sobek. "What are their interests?" asked T'Challa. "Experimentation," replied Sobek. Chapter 5 T'Challa was having dinner with his Egyptian friend from an alternate Earth. He asked her about Amit, Bast, and Khonshu. Nanette explained that Amit was the crocodilian eater of souls, Bast was the lioness in war and Khonshu was the red moon. "Did they ever use avatars?" asked T'Challa. "In some stories they did. Are you going to tell me what this is about?" "I am monitoring something and looking at the possibilities," replied T'Challa. "You are very dramatic," said Nanette. "Like this?" he asked and kissed her. Later T'Challa reflected on the future Wakanda that he saw. The nation had converted to pacifism for some reason and Eric's rise was meant to reverse it. T'Challa was not fond of King Eric nor could he let Raven run free because of her philosophy. He had to find means to control them. Nanette was having another bad dream due to the post-traumatic stress of her alternate Earth being destroyed. She tossed and turned next to T'Challa so he applied pressure to a nerve center to relax her body before her telekinesis became unstable and damaged the house. He left and took a stroll in the courtyard. He sensed movement by one of the trees, his attire quickly transformed into the Black Panther suit. "Hey," said an astral projection of Raven. "Are you still in the future?" asked T'Challa. Yes. Soberk is giving me a boost. The Ivory Kings have showed up in North America where the Amit computer is mostly used. Give me a moment, said T'Challa. He then typed a message on his Kimoyo that his smart house would deliver to Nanette when she wakes. His second message was sent to his sister. The Black Panther teleported into the future and he met Raven in her living room. Soberk gazed through a window with his back to them. The Ivory Kings have taken over the Amit. Wakanda has the only military force due to Eric, so North America has asked him to intervene and he declined. He has put his resources on the protection of the Bast server, said Raven. How many Ivory Kings? Asked T'Challa. 6 or more, replied Soberk. He will help on this occasion, said Raven to T'Challa. It crossed the Black Panther's mind that Soberk brought the Ivory Kings to kill him. But T'Challa was prepared, much like he was ready to defeat Soberk at any time. This is the plan, said T'Challa, and he explained the tactics. 5 minutes later, Black Panther and Soberk arrived in the sky above the array of servers for the Amit in Houston. 7 Ivory Kings were on the compound and they communicated with Amit. T'Challa landed next to the group while Soberk flew around them and created a barrier. T'Challa knocked his wrists together and that started the formation of clawed techno-mystical gauntlets on his hands. He assumed that the Ivory Kings only knew how to direct their power at an opponent but not how to fight strategically. He used that to his advantage. T'Challa used quick bursts of teleportation to slash off the coiled appendages of the Ivory Kings with the gauntlets. The gauntlets automatically told his energy spears what frequency to use in their composition to hurt the Ivory Kings. He parried the Ivory Kings' power attacks with his forearm force fields. Then in mid-teleportation T'Challa deactivated the gauntlets and brought out the energy spears. T'Challa threw the short weapons into the Ivory Kings and they shattered the bodies. Soberk came down and used a spell that sent the remains of the Ivory Kings into a void. Let us get back to Raven, said Soberk, and he teleported. T'Challa did likewise, but when he returned to Raven's apartment he found it unfurnished and Raven was gone. Eric sat on the windowsill. What's up? Said Eric. Where is she? Asked T'Challa. Rulers need spies and Raven is the best spy there is. I will take her off your hands since I am ruling your Wakanda now. Do you want to know what year your sister dies? T'Challa kept his presence of mind. Eric walked up to him and said, the head scientist in this Wakanda is Shuri's namesake and today she told me about your visit that was brought about by Bast. Raven said that this girl may plot against me based on a probe that was done. How should I handle it? Should I get rid of her now or have her on a short leash? You are asking me for advice on whether to kill a teenager, said T'Challa. I did not say kill, just get rid of, said Eric. When Raven uses the term get rid of she means kill. That trouble is on your hands now, said T'Challa and continued, because I know that it will pain you to lose that bright girl. By the way, you need me to correct the wreck that Wakanda has become, said Eric. Eric moved back to the window and said, I will be seeing you around. I have to deal with the Ivory King's reprogramming of the network. Then his clothes turned into a vibranium smart suit and he jumped from the window. Next story, Controlled Opposition. The year 4086, the dark web. Bast said no. The AI stood firm against its counterparts Amit, Khonshu, White Tiger, and Ohiaku on the issue of having Wakanda's king assassinated. Chapter 1 Wakanda, 4086. The first year of the warrior monarchy's return. King Eric felt vindicated when Shuri and her 16-year-old namesake entered his throne room. What brings you to the future and to my presence? Asked Eric. The young lady said that the ancient books are kept by you, replied Shuri. And? Asked Eric. I need to go through the Book of Kings and Queens, said Shuri. Eric pulled on his beard and said, I understand. You want to get information on what lies in your future. He looked at the 16-year-old girl who stood behind Shuri. How does it feel to meet the historical figure that you were named after? Asked Eric. Normal, replied the girl. Has Bast acted up again? He asked. All the reprogramming was done and Bast is working as it should, replied the girl. What would I do without you and Riri? Asked Eric. Shuri went closer to him and said, Eric, the book, now. I am the king of Wakanda, princess. Don't speak to me in that tone, especially in front of my people, said Eric. Shuri's skin turned metallic and she asked the teenager for privacy. When the girl left, Shuri reached violently for Eric's arm. His clothes quickly transformed into a vibranium smart suit and he caught Shuri's hand. What are you going to do? Turn into little birdies? Asked Eric. Shuri began to anamorph, but it was not into her normal blackbirds and Eric released her. Shuri took a step back and she became a 12 feet tall Kora eagle that had metal in its wings, beak, and talons. The eyes were searing red. The book, said Shuri, now. Eric thought about a fight, but he did not know what else Shuri was capable of, so he relented and led her to his office. Shuri returned to her human form but still kept the metallic skin. The Book of Kings and Queens along with other texts were kept by Eric when he discovered that the digitized versions were erased in an incident 50 years ago. They were the only hard copies of books that existed. Eric gave Shuri the book and she went through it quickly. He came over her shoulder and saw that she looked at the genealogy section. Shuri closed the book immediately and handed it to him. Where is the real book? Asked Shuri. What are you talking about? That is a fake, said Shuri and pointed to the book. It was given to me by the counselors. I don't know anything about a forgery. Why would I lie? Shuri looked deeply into his eyes and she said, find out what happened to the original. A lot has occurred in 2000 years. The original might be lost, said Eric. I have threatened you before and I will not do so again. I will just act on my promise if you are involved in this, said Shuri. Like brother, like sister. Give T'Challa my regards, said Eric. Shuri touched the seal on her panther necklace and she teleported into the past. Eric returned the book to the safe with the other texts and he wondered if those two were forgeries. He sat on his desk and spoke to a black computerized box. Bast, said Eric. Yes, Eric. What did you want to talk about before we were interrupted? My fellow Ace are concerned that your disruption of the status quo will be adopted by the wider world, replied Bast. How do they know that it will spread? We can predict human behavior. Eric looked at the 21st century stylized box. He had it made specifically for him so that he could interface with the supercomputer. The rest of humanity had data pins installed on their foreheads that linked their brains to the nanomachines that were pumped into the air and formed the Ace. He liked the idea that his 21st century views could take over the world. Bast, how can I get rid of these other Ace? Asked Eric. Chapter 2 Wakanda. Present day. The Hyena crew collected Wakanda's old tech from homes, businesses, and state installations. T'Challa learned of a particular Hyena crew member who was scheduled to visit the home of Okoye's clan elder, and the Black Panther waited for the person. The young man passed an invisibility-cloaked T'Challa in the clan elder's office. The man placed surveillance devices in strategic locations and then he rejoined his unit as they replaced the redundant parts in the smart house. T'Challa took all the surveillance items and he sneaked out of the house. T'Challa went to his head of state office and he manipulated the surveillance devices. The merchant clan elder Njobo who ordered the surveillance would be given false information on the names of the warriors who may represent Okoye in the Yelan ceremonial fight that was set up to break his decree on her. Shuri teleported into the office and she gave the time-space computers back to T'Challa. I did not find what I was looking for, said Shuri. T'Challa speculated that her time travel had something to do with her Membek powers and if they would be transferred to someone else as per tradition. He did not want to get further involved in his sister's personal life and marriage. How did the Hyena crew mission go? Asked Shuri. Svanny's intel was spot on. I got the surveillance items and I am misdirecting N'Jobo, replied T'Challa. Good. By the way, you will get an official notification today that Nakia has transferred out of the Commando Division to join the Foreign Spies Division, said T'Challa. She finally made up her mind, said Shuri. She said that being in the Dorum mileage under Okoye was too stressful because N'Jobo has not lifted the decree, said T'Challa. Do you need help with the Yelan? Asked Shuri. Everything is set for the Yelan now that I have N'Jobo where I want him, replied T'Challa. After the Yelan, we will have to look at Eric, said Shuri. How did you find him to be? He was the same but the girl that you put me on to has reservations about him, replied Shuri. In what way? It is complicated because he is not a tyrant but his actions are changing the way of life in that future of Wakanda and some people are opposed to it. We have to monitor how he controls the opposition, replied Shuri. What did you think of the girl? Headstrong. She said that her parents heard about me and gave her my name, replied Shuri. Ororo has a daughter about the girl's age. Her name is Chimera and she is from another alternate future, said T'Challa. Is she yours? Chimera will not say who the father is, replied T'Challa. I see. When did you find out? Ororo called after you left. She wants me to look out for the girl, said T'Challa as an image shot out of his kimono that showed a teenager and a large black panther next to her. Chimera and Ororo aren't on speaking terms and the girl is wandering the planet, said T'Challa. Interesting, said Shuri. Also, did you interact with the Bast computer? The girl did. I just watched. She told me that Bast is even in their bloodstreams to keep the bodies healthy, replied Shuri. I see, said T'Challa. Also someone has doctored that future Wakanda's history of our present day, said Shuri and she explained that changes were made to a historical text. Someone stole history, said T'Challa. I think it was done for control purposes because a politician gave Eric the text, said Shuri and continued, I want to investigate it but how much leeway do I have when operating in the future Wakanda? It depends on the impact your actions may cause in terms of ripple effects. The time paradoxes are within limits for now, replied T'Challa and went on. But I don't think an investigation is necessary, he said. Why? Asked Shuri. This is my theory based on experience with Ace like Ultron, Vision, Nimrod, and Master Mole. The very nature of Ace is that they can think faster than humans and forecast with accuracy based on behavioral patterns. Bast and the other Ace should have predicted the future Wakanda's transition away from the rest of the global society status quo. Eric's teachings on human independence from machines is nothing new and it should not have been allowed to blossom as it did unless Bast made it happen, replied T'Challa. But the girl controls Bast, said Shuri. I doubt anyone really controls those Ace, said T'Challa. Why would Bast encourage Eric's ideas? Asked Shuri. There are 5 Ace that are equally matched and they run the future. Normally there would be one master AI controlling everything because decisions can be made and implemented quicker. The introduction of a breakaway Wakanda and Eric gives Bast an advantage to remove the other Ace, replied T'Challa. But Eric seeks to move away from reliance on Bast, said Shuri. Bast is controlling Eric until it gets the intended outcome, then it will discard him. That is my assumption, said T'Challa. So Bast may have altered the book to influence the politicians to adopt traditionalism, said Shuri. It is speculation at this point, said T'Challa. But T'Challa, we can stop that future by returning to a monarchy today, said Shuri. I will need Njobo's agreement and all the other clan elders' consent to restart the monarchy, said T'Challa. Do we help Eric? I have to think about it, but I am worried about the girl if my theories are correct, replied T'Challa. I see. There is one more time paradox that I will put into play as an insurance, and it involves Svanee roaming as a ghost in Wakanda for another 2,000 years, said T'Challa, and he outlined his plan. Shuri left moments later to call her husband Kana and then to check in with Okoye. Chapter 3. Shuri was 2 weeks pregnant based on the latest medical exam. She went into the future to make sure that there were no miscarriages and that the Jabari Membek gifts were passed on in her family. But the Book of Kings and Queens stated that she never had children. The rest of the book had passages that were not in same book that was presently on her dressing room table. Kana was in Mali with Ramonda on her visit to that country. Shuri wanted to tell him about the pregnancy in person. Her mother-in-law Vi stated a few days ago that 2 more gifts remained to be transferred to Shuri, and then Shuri would become the sole user of the Membek gifts until it passed on to her daughter or daughter-in-law. I have to get through this, said Shuri as she reflected on the empty family tree boxes under her name in the book. She tried to sleep, but her thoughts kept her awake. Shuri called T'Challa and asked for the time computers. The necklace teleported to her and she used it to travel to the future. She startled the 16-year-old in her apartment. Don't scare me like that, ancestor, said the girl. Ancestor? That is what you are. Shuri pointed to the small data pin on the girl's forehead. Did it hurt when they put it in? She asked. I was a newborn, so I am not aware if it hurt or not. Why are you here again? I am sorry that I left the last time without saying goodbye. It was rude, said the girl. Are you busy? Asked Shuri. I can spare a few moments. Where are your parents? In Guatemala. Is Bast listening to us? Yes, replied the girl. Give me your hand, said Shuri. This is weird, said the girl as she held Shuri's hand. I want to take us to a place to talk in private. Shuri touched the teleporter and it did not work. Shuri asked the time computers for a reason and they said a force blocked the wormhole. Bast? Asked Shuri. Obviously, replied the girl and her data pin blinked. Bast said that your psychological readings are unstable, said the girl. Okay, take me to Eric again, said Shuri. The girl's data pin blinked. Bast said no. Shuri frowned. Why is Bast blocking my teleportation? Asked Shuri. Because someone is coming, replied the girl. Bucky Barnes, aka the Winter Soldier, appeared on the other side of the apartment. He had a data pin on his forehead and he opened fire at the girl with his assault rifle. Shuri used her superhuman speed gift to reach in front of the girl. Shuri's skin turned metallic and the bullets bounced off of her. Get away from here, said Shuri to the girl. Shuri ran into Bucky. In the back of her mind she recalled that the Captain America Super Soldier Serum was in Bucky as well. She was not surprised that Bucky tracked her superhuman speed and kicked her in the midsection. Shuri was knocked down and she took the moment to look for the girl, but she had left. Good, said Shuri, and she transformed into the Cobra Eagle. Shuri grabbed Bucky with her talon and flew through the wall. She ascended over Wakanda's capital and dropped Bucky. He used her rope to lasso the talons, so Shuri transformed into a flock of black birds. Bucky fell to his death. Shuri was not sure if he was an imposter and she had no time to think about it. The flock of birds went to the Valley of Kings and Queens where the Black Panther clan were buried. There Shuri met the ghost Svanee just as T'Challa had planned. Svanee directed Shuri to a time capsule and she opened it. Seconds later, T'Challa appeared. Svanee then guided T'Challa and Shuri to Eric's citadel. Chapter 4 The Throne Room. T'Challa could not believe what he saw. White Wolf and Wade Wilson aka Deadpool fought against Eric. The two assassins had data pins that blinked repeatedly on their foreheads. Shuri was about to enter the fight, but T'Challa told her to wait. "I smell poison on the sword and spear that Eric fights with," said T'Challa. "White Wolf and Deadpool are slowing down," said Shuri. Moments later the assassins collapsed, then they disappeared before Eric had a chance to finish them off. T'Challa and Shuri approached him. "The Winter Soldier was sent for the girl too. She got away, but I don't know where she went," said Shuri. "She probably went to RIRI, said Eric. "Why were they attacking you?" asked T'Challa. "How the hell should I know? Those clowns are not even supposed to be in this century," replied Eric. A time-space portal appeared in the throne room and the Hulk ran out of it. He immediately attacked Eric. T'Challa noticed the data pin on his forehead. Another person emerged from the portal. It was the Juggernaut, and he went at T'Challa and Shuri. "I am on the Hulk," said Shuri. "I will not be long with the Juggernaut," said T'Challa. The Black Panther slashed the fleshy legs of the giant with his energy gauntlets, and when the being fell forward, T'Challa then sent an energy spear through Juggernaut's helmet. T'Challa then caught the last moments of the Hulk and Shuri fight. The Cobra Eagle distracted the Hulk while Eric's sword swipe took out the Hulk's eyes. Then the Warbird ruptured the Hulk's neck with its beak. Shuri became human and she punched the flooring with superhuman speed until it gave way and the Hulk fell through. "That will not keep him for long," she said. "We have to get on to Bast and the girl," said T'Challa. "Take us to RIRI, Shuri said to Eric. The group left the citadel. Eric rode a hover bike and T'Challa got a ride on the back of the Cobra Eagle. They met Lady Deathstrike and Lady Shiva in front of RIRI's home. "It is simple. We will hand over the girls in exchange for Eric's head," said Lady Deathstrike. T'Challa could not detect the girls, but they were previously there. Eric knelt in front of Lady Deathstrike and he said, "Take my head." Chapter 5 The Dark Web. Amit and Bast plotted against the other Ace for over a century. The two sent evidence of the attack on Wakanda to the Human Tribunal, which showed that White Tiger, Khonshu, and Ohiako were corrupted. By law the rogue Ace needed to be shut down. The year 3006. The doppelganger Reed the Maker Richards listened closely to every word from the Kree chief scientist. The Kree want to create other Earths across the cosmos. Humans have been an astounding achievement. They have fended off invasions and were at the center point of universal events. But we know so little about what makes them so special. Is it their souls, DNAs, habits, and preferences that make the species unique? We want you to collect and mine the data of every member of the human race for the Kree, said the chief scientist. What is in it for me? Asked Reed Richards. The challenge of accomplishing the task. The Kree will give you 1,000 years to set up and run the data mining operation. How should I go about it? The Kree will leave that up to you. Also, it must be done in secret. The use of 5 worldwide Ace was the strategy that came to Reed's mind. Chapter 1 The year 4086. Wakanda. The assassins were amateurs to T'Challa the Black Panthers, so he whistled a signal to his sister for her to kill them. Shuri had the would-be killers dead on the ground in the blink of an eye. King Eric was incensed even though his life was saved because he had accepted death in exchange for the lives of his people. T'Challa pointed out to him that the assassins had data pins on their foreheads, which meant that they were controlled by the same Ace that could transport people like the Black Panther through the time stream. "If they really wanted you dead, then it would be already done," said T'Challa. "But they kidnapped my people," said Eric. "We will find the girls," said T'Challa. "How?" "By getting in touch with the creators of the Ace," replied T'Challa. The creators died out. The only living descendant is Rahkan Richards. He is the chairman of the panel that oversees the ACE, said Eric. Take us to him, said T'Challa. He lives on a freaking space station near the moon, said Eric and continued, but don't trip, I restarted Wakanda's space program a while ago. Restarted? Eric touched a computerized bead on his wrist and said, the end of the 21st century was the curtain call on costumed vigilantes and criminals. It was the new era of enlightenment led by Tetuism and Chimerism. The so-called great thinkers changed everything about human society. Even the Wakanda Senate was affected. There were gender wars, the abolishment of the clan systems and the dismantling of the military, including the space program. The 5 A's came years later and they ushered in this global utopia that you see now. Wakanda was no longer a nation of warriors, it was just another nation with data pins in the heads of its people like everywhere else on the planet. A Wakandan spaceship came overhead and it beamed up the 3 warriors. Chapter 2. Shuri was suspicious of Eric and she did not believe that he was ignorant as to why he was attacked. But she kept the thoughts to herself. Eric's history lesson on Wakanda over the last 2 millennia made her want to preserve her way of life even more than before. She promised herself to take charge of Wakanda's history texts when she returned to the 21st century. She would not allow them to become forgeries as she believed had occurred during the course of the 2,000 years. She reflected on the kidnapped girl who carried her name. The girl had referred to Shuri as an ancestor, but it was her tone that implied something else. Savage was the impression that Shuri got from the tone of voice. The girl abhorred violence, which was reasonable based on the present Wakandan society. It was the reason that the girl disliked the return of the warrior monarchy. That was the hardest part for Shuri to understand, Wakanda's abandonment of the warrior spirit in the last 2,000 years. Did it become a facade? She guessed that her Membek warrior garb secretly irked the girl. Shuri also wanted to know more about the gender war that occurred. How did that come about? She took the example of her mother-in-law Vi, who possessed the great Membek powers, and her husband and sons were comfortable with it. And they were Jabari, the most traditional people in Wakanda. So what broke down in society for groups of men and groups of women to fall into conflict with each other? Was it a misunderstanding? Did values change over time? Did both sides become fearful of each other? Could she leave a message for them to prevent the war? The abolishment of clan identity was debatable in Shuri's mind. She was born into the clan system and never doubted its role. She was a Black Panther clan woman and a Jabari clan woman as well through her marriage to Kana. The blurred lines between clan families due to marriage was commonplace in her time. Clan identity was used because it traced a person back to the founding clans of the nation. It was a connection to the past. Most likely the new Wakanda did not see the merit in keeping or celebrating that connection, so they stopped the clan names. Shuri did not like it, but their decision was reasonable. Chapter 3. T'Challa overheard Eric's whispered James Bond comment as they viewed the Megaplex space station. T'Challa noticed the Kree-styled space cruiser in the docking bay. He was glad that not everything had changed over the years. Shuri came next to him and she also recognized the Kree ship. "Those aliens will always be tied to humans, it seems," said Shuri. "I wonder if this generation remembers the Wakanda Kree Pact?" asked T'Challa. "I doubt it," replied Shuri. "I am more concerned that my people have not died because we took the time to visit a space station." "Let's go already," said Eric, and he jumped out of the spaceship before it landed. "Rahkan Richards, are you home?" shouted Eric. "The King of Wakanda wants a word with you right now." When T'Challa disembarked, he recognized the scent of Reed the Maker Richards, and the other scent was that of a lone Kree. Reed Richards came into the docking bay and said, "The barbarians are at the gate." "Nice to see you, T'Challa." Isn't the 21st century king a little comedic? If you don't give the right answers, I will show you how 21st century I can be, said Eric as he went up to Reed's face. Rahkan Richards is not a clever name, said T'Challa. No one remembers what Rahkan originally means, said Reed. 2 girls are missing. One is the network administrator for the Bast AI. Eric and her were attacked by presumably AI-controlled assassins, said Shuri. I am aware of the disturbance in Wakanda that was orchestrated by Bast and its partner Amit in order to force the Council to shut down the other 3 Ace, said Reed. Eric backed away from him. You seem shocked, said Reed and continued, before we get into a classic 21st century style brawl and damage valuable equipment, I will just tell you everything. You are standing in a data center. The data is given to the Kree to help them refine their experiment of duplicating human civilization in the universe. The data comes from Earth through the data pins. It is a win-win situation. Humans live in a paradise and the Kree get what they want. The Ace have not enslaved humanity, there is no crime involved. So why did Bast turn? Asked Eric. I did not have total control over the creation of Bast, likewise Amit. Wakanda and Stark's Descendants did the work on those 2 for Africa and the Americas respectively. I suspect that the coders put in some 21st century moral influence, replied Reed. People have the right to know where records of their personal lives are going, said Shuri. That is 21st century thinking. In this world everything is openly shared. Personal data is a thing of the past and that is enshrined in the law of every nation. I made sure of that. What I am doing is perfectly legal, said Reed. Eric punched at Reed's face, but Reed's body expanded like elastic and wrapped around Eric's torso like a boa constrictor. But laws can be repealed and values can change. The Wakanda under your anti-machine reliance agenda is a credible threat to my operation. But it was so nice of you to visit instead of me having to hunt you down, said Reed as he forced his hand down Eric's throat. T'Challa sent an energy spear through Eric's back and into Reed's now elongated head. T'Challa did it that way because Reed would have dodged an open attack. Reed slithered off of Eric. Shuri in her monstrous Cobra eagle form caught Reed in her metal talons like a worm. She crushed his head with her metal beak. Yet he still lived. T'Challa carried Eric to the medical section of the Wakandan spaceship. Eric fought to stay alive as best as possible. T'Challa applied nanites to the wound and the machines repaired the damage. That was a hell of a move. Get the bastard. Get the girls, said Eric since he could not move until the healing was completed. T'Challa returned to the docking bay. No matter which direction Reed turned, no matter how many appendages and heads he grew or his increases in height, Shuri in her metallic and superhuman speed forms knocked him down. T'Challa went on the hunt for the Kree. After breaking down several doors, the Black Panther found the alien. Do you intend to get in my way? Asked T'Challa. No. Where is the interface to connect with the AI programming? Asked T'Challa. The Kree led him to 5 giant-size holographic avatars of Amit, Bast, White Tiger, Khonshu and Ohiaku. Amit and Bast's avatars were marked online while the others were offline. Bast, hear and recognize my voice. I am T'Challa. You brought me to this future. You must find the girls. I do not know where they are. Their data pins are not on the scans, said Bast. T'Challa thought about it. Top assassins from his era were used to kill Eric except for Moon Knight, which did not make sense since the man was on the short list for most assassinations. T'Challa's gut feeling was that Moon Knight was utilized but in a different capacity. Bast, take me to Egypt. Longitude Chapter 4. Egypt was now a tropical forest due to terraformation by the Khonshu AI. Bast sent T'Challa to the coordinates for the temple that Moon Knight was associated with. Moon Knight was found slumped in front of 2 fresh graves. The data pin on his forehead was inactive. T'Challa assumed that when the rogue ace went offline, so did their puppets. T'Challa dug up the graves and he found the 16-year-old girls buried alive in lead boxes. Once T'Challa got them out, the girls' data pins blinked rapidly and their physical well-being improved. T'Challa assumed that it was due to the nanites in the bloodstream reconnecting with Bast. "Thank you, Bast," said the girl that carried Shuri's name. "Where are we? Who is that? And who are you?" the next girl asked of T'Challa. "Let's get you home," replied T'Challa and went on, "Have Bast return me to Richard's space station." "You met Rah Khan in person?" asked the second girl. "Yes. But there will be major changes to the running of the Ace. I will tell you more later." The space station Shuri systematically positioned Reed in front of the thrusters of the Wakandan spaceship. In a flash, she went to the cockpit and turned on the thrusters in a short burst, then she returned outside to find Reed on the ground with severe burns to his body. He was alive, but the fight was over for him. T'Challa returned to the docking bay with the unconscious Kree on his shoulder. He told her that the girls were found and they were sent to Wakanda. "Good," said Shuri and explained her plan for Reed. She then put Reed into the ship. She flew it to the asteroid belt and Shuri latched Reed onto a small asteroid without a spacesuit. He froze quickly due to the low temperature. Shuri took a laser from her spacesuit and wrote for Wakanda, above Reed's head. When she got back on the ship, Shuri had a chat with Eric while he recovered. "This is your last chance to come clean about your part in what transpired today," said Shuri. "Why are you on my case?" "Because you have lied to me before." "I did no such thing." "One day, Eric, one day, remember that," said Shuri, and she left him. The situation bothered her because the fallout of the day's events meant that Bast along with Amit ruled the world, with one network administrator being from Wakanda and Eric had direct control over that person. But T'Challa's spite Svanny the Ghost was still in that timeline and Eric did not know about her. Shuri planned to use that advantage. A week later, present-day Wakanda, 21st century Shuri finally had a conversation with T'Challa about his opinion of Wakanda's possible future. "First of all, we have to thank Svanny for the hard work that she did for us," said T'Challa. "After all those centuries, and she was still enthusiastic as she is today to serve Wakanda," said Shuri. "Very commendable. Are you disappointed with the changes that took place in Wakanda? Some of our ancestors might be rolling in their graves because of the changes I made to the isolation policy. This is not the Wakanda they knew, but is the Wakanda for the present time's challenges. The same with the future Wakanda. I am disappointed with it, but I will not be around to live in those eras and to know why certain decisions were made," replied T'Challa. "By the way, I am pregnant," said Shuri. "Congrats. Kana must be ecstatic." "Overly so." Although Shuri was overjoyed, in the back of her mind she carried the failure that she did not find out about her lineage, which was the purpose of her trip to the future in the first place. The future records showed that she did not have children, and she told no one this because it scared her. Wakanda 4086. The flock of blackbirds returned to the counselor's home at midnight after another secret test. The birds transformed into a woman, then she went to sleep since using the Membek gifts gave her headaches and left her exhausted. The councilwoman had given Eric the forged Book of Kings and Queens that omitted her link to Shuri. The reason was that as a neo-traditionalist, the councilwoman did want people to know that Chung Mayer the Enlightened One was both Shuri's direct descendant and the councilwoman's ancestor. The shame would be too great to bear.